Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be here. I've certainly enjoyed an informative day. I'm going to switch gears a little bit. This is not so much a technology talk as a little bit about business collaboration and how a well-functioning ecosystem can really help. So, what we want to think about is what is a successful ecosystem. The critical elements for participating companies really starts with having a clear goal on what a desired outcome looks like, and that each of the companies can focus on what they do best. Because clearly, if you've got multiple companies involved, that actually presents some challenges in terms of barriers or boundaries between companies. So if everyone doesn't have alignment and understanding of a good outcome, it's really hard to be successful. So if these goals and capabilities are well aligned, a great ecosystem is really going to deliver economies of scale and allow profitability for all the participants. And from a semiconductor point of view, we really want to see customers reach high yielding solutions, and obviously solutions high yielding, that means it's fitting a market need. You don't get to big yield and big volumes unless you're really meeting a need of a customer. So if you take a glance at the change in the semiconductor rankings over a period of 9 or 10 years, it highlights the fact that numerous companies don't perform all tasks internally and have started being successful. In other words, kind of what we call a fabless semiconductor company. But what is not so clear from looking at the ranking is even the companies that historically have been perceived as IDMs, in other words, they're vertically integrated and they do all the tasks themselves. Today, that's really not true. There's been a lot of evolution to much more hybrid models, where you've got combinations of internal and external development and manufacturing, as well as numerous other activities that were supplied internally even 10 years ago that are now being supplied more successfully by outside companies. And the question is, what drives the decision to move from internal to external sourcing? And it can be one factor, or it can be a combination of factors. Some really good examples are if an outside source has reached a point of economies of scale that an internal resource can't match, you really don't have any choice. You're at a cost disadvantage. You've got to move to the supplier with a greater economy of scale. On the other hand, if an outside company has a differentiated offering that leaves you at a competitive disadvantage, it's the same problem. Their technology is now what the market expects. If you can't meet that standard, you're also going to have to rely on the outside source. Another common use of outside sources is more as just an insurance policy or a buffer for fluctuating demand. You can think of it as almost like an equivalent of a hedge. This is really a graphic just talking about kind of a common semiconductor ecosystem. And I think often when we think about ecosystems, we think about things in kind of the primary chain through development and manufacturing. And clearly those are a lot of the big tasks. I mean, for us, from 동부하이텍 as a foundry, we're in the manufacturing piece, and we're expecting products to come into the foundry. But there's also a lot of opportunities for collaboration through other not so direct activities, even business activities like marketing. You can have very differentiated activities, such as we were just listening to interface standards. Most of those interface standards require certifications. Often that's a very specialized skill set. So you may go to a third party to get that certification, which is going to be important to participate in the marketplace. But the trick is really matching all of these companies with the best skill set for the desired product and market application. And really in high tech, that's the key. And there's so many shades of gray in terms of the choices that you make. I think, David this morning really had a lot of examples of it. You can come at solving the same problem through multiple avenues. And one answer isn't necessarily clearly better than the other. It's really getting into the details of how you implement it and meet those markets' needs. And so one of the keys is finding the resources that have the right expertise and the right skill set. Because often that difference in skill set and expertise is what makes the difference between winning and being able to grab the market solution versus being a miss. So, one example that I was looking at in the analog space is we've spent a lot of effort in analog because it's been more difficult to automate development compared to, say, digital design. But it has gotten better. But one area that is really a challenge today in analog is actually test development. As analog has gotten more complex, as you have more high performance standards to meet, the cost of the production tester can go up. The length of time to develop the production tester can really increase. And so if you look at your total product development time, all of a sudden, the test development and implementation time can start looking like as long as the design, time itself on the front end. And so, an example is if I'm looking for an ecosystem partner to solve that problem, I need somebody that really understands analog test. And so if I've got someone who can come in during design and say, if you make a couple of design changes, I can substantially change how we develop your test program and what tester we have to put it on. So in other words, we can develop your test program faster, we can put you on a lower cost tester. That ends up being a huge differentiation for that product going into the marketplace. They get to market faster and they get to market in volume at lower cost. So this is really my little simplistic example of a very basic ecosystem with a lot of really basic assumptions. But on this side, I've got kind of 4 companies that are equally dividing up the activity and a single company here. The advantage that you have in this space is that each of these companies has an opportunity to really focus. They've got some tasks that they do well. Because they're focusing on that and because they're getting business from a broader marketplace rather than just internally, they have the opportunity to drive economies of scale. The other thing that's nice about this model is that you've got more clarity and mission. And that actually can be an edge in terms of attracting the best talent. And talent's one of those crazy things, is you attract better talent, you create a bigger lead, and you grow your advantage. But talent usually likes to go someplace where they feel like that the skill that they have is directly related to the core focus area of the business. In other words, I'm working on something that really matters to my company. And so again, and then you feel like you've got career growth. And so that can be a really important advantage. And the other thing is, as you get that talent in place, you're able to increase your differentiation in terms of what you're delivering to the market. But on the opposite side, if you are a more aggregated solution, you have less transitions in terms of transitions from one company to another. Company to company relationships can be interesting because sometimes you can be in a cooperative relationship and sometimes it becomes more competitive. Sometimes everybody's kind of trying to get a piece of the same financial gain, right? And so, it's difficult to find the boundary kind of where everybody is successful. A lot of that may get simplified in a well-functioning single entity. That doesn't mean all single entities are well-functioning inside. Sometimes you can have problems across organizations inside a company. But you also have a common management change. So when there is conflict, there is the likelihood that you can get it resolved quickly, because you can kind of go to a single decision maker to work through the problem. And again, in high tech, informal communication is really important, sharing ideas. And sometimes if you're all in one company, you may have access to kind of understanding what the other functions are doing, which may actually give you some insights on a different way to solve a problem, because you've got a little more shared understanding and technology. So the reality is that today, we are in a world where ecosystems are here, and you have to find a way to make them function successfully. So some of the things that we really need to see is that the ecosystem is allowing the participating companies to build on their strengths and differentiated capabilities, that there's a very clear understanding of who's doing what, and that it's good business for each side. If you have mismatch, you aren't going to execute well, you're not going to satisfy your customers' needs. And really, at the end of the day, the ecosystem better deliver a better cost model than what you would get without it. And so that means that the economies of scale have to overcome the fact that you've got more companies with their own company overhead involved, right? I mean, there's overhead to running any individual company. So that really has to be kind of overcome with the economies of scale that you grow. And then trust and communication and joint commitment to success. Everybody needs to be focused on making the end customer successful. And if you do that, you effectively, between the member companies, are successfully dividing and conquering on the problem. Operational efficiency is crucial, and it lots of times is a thing that is not so exciting, right? It isn't quite so motivating to think about day in and day out how I just get smarter about the things that I was doing last week. If I had a way of doing something last week and it worked and it didn't create a problem, why is somebody coming in and asking me to do it faster and better? But the reality is we're in a world that moves at a speed that the normal world doesn't even understand. And so if you aren't continuously improving your efficiencies and looking for ways to get better, you're going to get left behind. And similarly, a poorly architected ecosystem can be totally bogged down in the transaction costs across the company boundaries. So that's another area of operational efficiency that really has to be worked on. So again, I can look at a lot of different tasks. I can identify various companies that can service each of those tasks, but I really want to find the best fit for the need. So if a company is architected around a more narrow mission, that company's got to be the best at what they do. And they have to be reinventing themselves and looking for the market discontinuities and opportunities. We've heard a couple of examples today of where those discontinuities and opportunities can happen. I mean, I think actually the talk this morning was a great example of several cases of where things looked like they were kind of innocuous change, and then all of a sudden they became really disruptive in a market. So if you have moved and you're in a company that is highly focused, you have to be aware of what may change in terms of how you approach the business that you're doing. Because if you don't, someone else is going to seize the opportunity. So let's talk for a minute about how you could create an example of a premier ecosystem. In 동부하이텍's case, we're very fortunate that we've got world-class leadership in analog and power process technologies. And so we wanted to spend some time identifying companies that would be complementary to what is a very important capability for us. And that they were capabilities that would help our customers achieve success faster. And so some examples is we identified one small company that's fairly new, only a couple years old, but they were started by a team of seasoned experts in power and automotive design. And in less than 2 years, they've already filed for more than 30 patents, and they basically have stayed in the black in their entire existence, which is always kind of impressive for a small startup. I kind of mentioned earlier a case of an analog design for test services company that really is innovative in terms of how they approach analog test development, and they've improved the efficiency and lowered the cost in terms of number of test engineers and the production costs of implementing those solutions. And so what they've really done is really kind of applied a lot more rigor and thought and engineering up front very early to tests. Or an FA company that instead of just being able to identify physical defects, which is always important, but they also understand how to go after kind of analog parametric problems, which can be a nightmare to find, particularly in these complex process technologies with lots of devices, lots of layers. And so in this company, they can read a schematic, bring in a design database, actually think about the circuit and electrical performance, and do the microprobing and actually the analysis to determine, you know, where the circuit is failing, and then to be able to go do the physical analysis to find the root cause. So combined with 동buhaitec's leading analog and power processes, as well as design kits that are full-featured with a lot of additional information required by a multitude of very specialized markets in analog and power, we feel like we're identifying companies that offer distinct differentiated capabilities for very specialized domain talent, and we think that's a unique angle. And so, you know, I guess in a quick conclusion, efficient ecosystems allow the potential for companies to focus on core competencies and generate economies of scale. But it's just as easy for disaggregated companies to find ways to create efficient workflows across company boundaries. You know, without some thought on the business processes and how everybody is going to actually have a successful business outcome, an ecosystem can actually be a source of problems, right? So there has to be effort on the technology side, but also on the business transaction side. And the best examples of ecosystems build on a clear understanding of their differentiated value, and probably more importantly, can continue to grow that differentiated value over time at a faster rate than their competition. So that's it. I just want to see if there are any questions.